This is Relationscapes, the podcast where we explore the stories and ideas that shape who we are and connect us with each other so we can build a better world. I'm journalist Blair Hodges, and our guide in this episode is author Maddie Norris.
I feel like in my day-to-day life now, I think the shadow thought will always be there. My dad is dead. It's always going to be devastating that he died. And also, he still brings me joy in my daily life.
People who experience the death of a loved one come to understand that grief isn't something you just get over. It's something that you have to try to learn to live with. That's what author Maddie Norris discovered after losing her dad at 17. Instead of looking away from the pain, she studied it through the lens of her father's own work as a medical researcher on the science of wounds. What she discovered wasn't closure, but a new way of thinking about and living with grief. Maddie Norris joins us to talk about her debut book, The Wet Wound, an elegy in essays, weaving together the history of wound care and the rituals of mourning. Maddie challenges the idea that healing means letting go. Instead, she asks, what if grief is more like tending an open wound, something tender and ongoing, and sometimes even joyful? Having lost my own dad at a similar age, this one hit really close to home. Maddie Norris, welcome to Relationscapes.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to talk about your book. It's a bit heavier than some of the books that we cover. It's about grief and about the death of your father. The subtitle is An Elegy in Essays. How would you describe an elegy for non-nerds? What is an elegy?
I mean, an elegy is really a poetic kind of eulogy, really. Yeah, and I chose elegy because I was really interested in different kinds of writing and different forms, and I wanted that to be apparent in the subtitle. So elegy kind of captures that poetics of it, and it also captures the subject matter, which is really deeply about grief, and then essays kind of adds to that idea.
A lot of the books that I cover on the show, I pick because they take me to unfamiliar places, and this book was different because when I read the description, I saw myself in this book, because cancer killed your father when you were 17, and my father died from cancer when I was 15, so we were both teenagers. And so approaching the book was kind of difficult for that reason, but also really cathartic to read it. So I wondered if that was sort of similar in how it was to write it, if you had those same kind of conflicted feelings.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people say that writing is therapy, and I think it can be, but I also think that writing can require therapy.
Yeah.
And I think it leaned more heavily towards that for me. I think it was really hard to write, and I was really thinking about it as an art object. So it was a lot of like personal excavation coupled with thinking about craft pretty deeply. But I think that what's been more cathartic for me has been the publication process and having it out in the world and being able to connect with people, like being able to connect with you. It's really special for me whenever I meet someone who says, oh, this spoke to me, and like this was someone that I lost, and let me tell you about them. That feels, yeah, in a way, pretty joyful, actually, to connect with people through that. It reminds me a lot of Ross Gay and Anna Singh. He kind of mentions Anna Singh, this idea of entanglement, and she talks about it in a very mycelial way through mushrooms, the way that we're all deeply entangled with each other. And I think that Ross Gay kind of takes that and thinks about it through grief and the way that grief deeply connects us all, and that joy is carrying that grief together. And so that's where I think that comes from for me, is really the publication process of being able to connect with other people feels really special. And I think that having a book object makes that a lot easier for people than, going up to random people and being like, here's my story.
Yeah. And I imagine that the writing process didn't necessarily feel like that, although you were doing work of excavation. Like you were looking through your dad's files, you were looking at historical examples. So writing can also be really solitary and isolating, but it seems like you were connecting in that process as well.
Yeah, and I think part of it was a way to connect to my dad. Like when I was going through his things, that's very direct connection, but even with the other research, that felt incredibly personal to me. So each bit of research, even if it was not directly from his life, connected me to him further. So it felt really personal in that way.
When I wanted to cover this book, I got a review copy of it from your press, and I set it aside, and I just... I would look at it sometimes and be like, okay, I need to get to this. I need to get to this. But I think that hesitation was, well, you put it into words for me in one of your pieces. You said, loss both repelled and attracted me. Like I had the book there. I could see it. I looked forward to reading it, but I also waited. And I was hoping you could read that piece for us about loss repelling and attracting you. This is on page 127.
Loss both repelled and attracted me. Others' wounds made me scratch at my own scabs. Curdled skin caught beneath prying fingernails. A painful reopening I wanted to avoid, especially this summer, when I'd been happy for the first time in a year, when I went to the movies again and made skillet-burst tomato pasta and read books about women pioneers in STEM fields. But I also knew that a wet wound, an open wound, was best for healing. In graduate school, I bonded with someone whose dad died a few years before mine. We could talk about our fathers in ways we couldn't with anyone else. We could talk about loss as part of our lives. That was my dad's favorite flavor of ice cream. He was the one that taught me about birds. We used to love swimming together. There's an undeniable attraction between those whose parents die early. We find each other without effort, pulled into one another by the emptiness within us. It happens almost immediately. When my dad died, Caitlin, a childhood friend, was there for me. She was there when Dad was diagnosed, and she was there when he went into the hospital, and she was there when he didn't come out. "Welcome to the club," she said as she hugged me. Our bones dug into each other's bodies. She was taller than me, and I buried my head in her shoulder. She held me steady as I wept. To this day, she holds me steady. Her mom died when we were in 3rd grade from the same cancer that killed my dad. If loss subtracted from a person, we'd be slivers of waning humans, waiting for the next death to carve us new.
I've said that exact phrase, welcome to the club, and depending on who I'm talking to, and depending on like the vibe, sometimes I've straight up said like, welcome to the Dead Dads Club. Like that's the club, right?
Yeah, it's not a great club to be a part of, but it also is.
Yeah. You talk about these wonderful people that you've connected with. What is it like for you then to relate to people who've lost a parent compared to maybe talking about it with people who haven't lost a parent?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of this book is about the ways that I connect to people through grief. And so initially in the beginning of the book and in the beginning of my processing of this, I would try and talk to him and people would kind of shut down. They felt really uncomfortable talking about grief when they hadn't experienced it themselves. And they didn't know what to say, and they were really focused on trying to say the right thing or they didn't want to hold it. They didn't want to touch it. And so I stopped talking about it and I shut down. And that was really painful for me because it was a type of disconnection from my dad. So I started trying to talk about him more and not really monitor others' responses to it, but say what I want to say and kind of let them have their own emotional experience with it. But it always feels really natural and easy when you meet someone who has had a similar experience because they feel kind of the same way, and that it is painful, but it's also really loving and caring to be able to talk about the people that we've lost. And it's a way to connect with them and have them in our lives as we move throughout it. So I think that that type of connection feels really special, and you don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to say, oh, I know that this was, this is still really hard, but also we can laugh about like funny things that happened when he was alive or funny things that happened in our life that we can talk about now as though like, oh, he would think this was funny too.
Yeah, you're talking about like ice cream, and that's totally fine to
Yeah.
do. You can do that. And also, I found sometimes people who had different relationships with their parent than I did. So people who maybe had a more toxic relationship with their parent, or people who I am jealous of the closer bond that they had. And even despite those differences, there's still a connection through it. And almost I feel a little bit more open to thinking through, oh, someone who had an abusive dad who lost them, and to feel a more natural catharsis with them, to be like, gosh, that would be a different situation. Even though we have so much to connect about, it can still be pretty different.
For sure. Yeah. I think that every loss and every type of grief is very different, but it lives in the same universe. So I do think that there is this way that we can really listen to one another and try and understand different relationships, just as we would when people were alive. Like, there are relationships and there are many different varieties of relationships. Yeah. And so understanding that and really listening to people, I feel like is really important.
Let's talk about the physical artifacts that we mentioned just a minute ago, these remnants from your dad's life. They play a pretty big part in your book. And you say that physical objects like postcards, for example, they're like time machines, right? They can collapse distance between past and present and between living and the dead. And there's this piece on page 22 that's about this. And I wanted to hear this one from you. It's different hearing it than reading it. You really get more, I think, from hearing the author.
Yeah. There's no question. I take after my dad. We laughed at the same jokes, loved the same books, were fascinated by the same things. We could spend hours walking around the neighborhood in the early evening, talking about nothing in particular. Old Green Day, Fulham FC, what I learned in school that day. We chatted as we wandered beneath blooming dogwoods and big oak trees, often stopping for ice cream on the way home once the sun sank below the horizon. We filled our days with each other's company. We just liked spending time together. Someone suggested in edits that I show my dad's faults to make him more real to readers, but I don't know that he had any other than the ones all humans do, that we are fragile creatures who love well and die. Perhaps I was too young to recognize his faults, but he was, to me, even at the time, a faultless father. He loved me well, and he did his best and saw me as I was and loved me for that. I don't know what more I could have asked for except time. When he died, time broke into before and after. Before, I collected postcards, but I never wrote on them. I'd never been separated from someone I wanted to share my life with. He'd been there for these moments. We ate shrimp burgers at that beach and rode our bikes past those red tulips and paddled down that rushing river in helmets and life vests. These images constellated our collective memories. There was no need to caption them for one another because we'd lived them together. After, it was like I'd stepped into a house of mirrors. Everywhere I turned, whether I was in North Carolina, Arizona, or Prague, there was only me, alone. I stopped collecting postcards. Everywhere was the same. Forests, deserts, beaches. Cold, hot, sunny, rainy. Everything was the same, empty. I was unanchored, unmoored. Time passed through me. I left the place where I grew up because it felt wrong to be there without him. Of course, it felt wrong to be anywhere without him. I went to college and graduate school in cities where no one else knew my dad. No one wanted to hear about my grief. The only thing that stopped the spinning, that collapsed the distance, was his box of letters. To cut open the days, I would take out a single postcard, read the words he wrote when he was my age, and rub the paper to remind myself that these memories were real, that I couldn't touch him, but I could touch what remained. It wasn't enough, but it's what I had.
So hearing you read that right now, it's like I said, it's different to hear you read it. And I imagine that it can be different depending on when you're reading it. So I was wondering, like, today, what is it like to read that one today?
Yeah, it definitely does change. And it's changed more as I've gotten further from the project too, because I think as I was really in it, I was thinking a lot about the craft of it and how to write it and what way to organize it, structure and syntax and things like that. And now that it's really its own thing, it feels like I can experience it more as a reader rather than a writer. So yeah, I think thinking about it today, I actually just got back from a trip with my boyfriend and we bought a bunch of postcards as we were going along. And so that really made me think of my dad as we were kind of going along the way. And it felt, really special and something that I don't think I would have done in any way if I hadn't written the book. I think that it was really helpful for me to process and sift through these things. And I think that right now makes me miss him, obviously.
Yeah.
But it also makes me want to, have these reminders to bring him into my daily life more.
Yeah, sometimes when you're missing them, they feel as close as they ever can, like it's kind of this really double-edged sword of sometimes the closest you can feel to them is precisely like the missing of them, and that's hard.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's like what grief is. Like, I think that people from a distance really feel like, oh, it's this heavy, sad thing. And it is, but it's also that love. And that is really the closest you can get, is like being in that space.
What's that quote from WandaVision? I'm going to Google it.
Oh, yeah, I think it's grief is love persevering.
What is grief if not love persevering? Like,
yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. And I think that, again, I think part of why I wrote this book was to dig into that and to hopefully help other people feel seen and also help people who don't have the same experience understand it a little bit more.
How was it then? I'm talking on a professional and technical level, right? You're a writer. This is your craft. And your dad was a doctor and you are a writer. And so in remembering him, you're also practicing your work. And it's something that will be commodified. It'll be for sale. You'll want to promote it, that kind of thing. So I wondered about that relationship to this, talking about something so personal, visceral, and tragic and loving and beautiful, and also that it's like part of your job.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing about being a writer is that you kind of don't turn it off. Everything that you do is like, for creative nonfiction, it's like, oh, this is research. Like, living my life is a part of research. And so it is a little bit complicated in that, it is a job that like I do get paid for, but it is also deeply a part of my life. And I think that also being a teacher has helped me a little bit with like, I have specific hours where I have to be doing a specific part of my job. And then outside that, I can kind of work on my own. Yeah, I also think like I didn't get an advance for this book. So I wasn't like I was paid and then I had to write it. It was like I wanted to write this and then I got paid. So it was really something that like I did for myself. And then someone wanted to give me some money for it.
You're like, okay, I'll take that. Like,
yeah, exactly.
That's a bonus.
Yeah, so I think that the process part of it, of writing, felt separate than the publication process. And I know people have a variety of publication experiences, and mine was pretty smooth and,
cool.
and really nice.
This is Georgia Press is who you published it with.
Yeah, Georgia Press
University
and the
of
Crux
Georgia,
series. Yeah, they were really great to work with, and one of the reasons that I really liked working with them is that they wanted to honor like the artistic vision. So like there are images in here. Images are more expensive to print.
Yeah.
And
even in black and white,
Exactly. Yeah. But they felt they're really integral to the work. And so it was important for me to work with a press who saw that rather than one that said, okay, well, this is more expensive, so we're not going to use these. Can you write around it? Because, as you were saying, like going through these archives and this research, that is a part of the writing process. That's a part of the grieving process. That's a part of how I connect with my dad. And so I wanted the images to be there to replicate part of that process, to have these medical diagrams in the book so that people could experience a little bit of what I experienced, kind of an echo of it, even though these are more artistic. And that's also important to me, to bring the science and the art together.
And you bring us in the room with you where you're you're looking at these things, and we kind of get to hold the artifacts at a distance. I mean, it's not the exact one, right? But you're putting us in that place. I think my favorite illustration, though, is on the cover. It's a very visceral, rich, beautiful color, this bright red. It's like a heart, but it's all the ventricles. So the actual meat of the heart isn't there. You're just looking at kind of the blood vessels all around it. And then in the center there, you see the wet wound, right? Which is the title of the book. Tell me about your decision to use such a bold title and to have such a striking cover. I imagine it could make some, the word wound, or it might trigger our disgust reflex or something.
Yeah.
Like, oh, get away from that. Talk about your decision to keep that bold title.
I mean, first of all, I am generally bad at titles. So I did have some help in that Andrew Munson, another writer who was my thesis advisor. It was in the book. It was really the central metaphor of the book. And he suggested I call it that. And I thought it really fit. And I think that
fits perfect.
I think that disgust too is part of what I want. I want people to know what they're getting into, and that I'm not going to shy away from the kind of literally bloody details of certain medical procedures, of grief. So you know what you're getting into when you read the title. And it is really a central metaphor. So my dad specifically was he was director of the Wound Healing Center in Columbia, South Carolina. And so he worked a lot with wounds. And one of the things I learned going through this research and these archives is that the best way to care for a wound physically, but also emotionally, is to keep it open and wet. And so
these are usually large wounds.
Yeah,
right?
but even smaller wounds, you want to keep them wet. So it's one of the reasons we put Vaseline over wounds, is to keep it,
yes.
Yes, yeah. So you keep it wet, and you don't want it to scab over, because that actually delays true healing. And if the scab pulls off, then you can actually pull off some of the healthy skin. So you want to keep it open in that sense, and that you don't want it to scabber.
Just moisturized, yeah. You're not saying keep pulling your scab off.
That would be bad. But yeah, you don't want it to scab over. So the scab is really, again, it delays true healing. So keeping it open and wet is the best way to care for any type of wound, but it can be harder with larger wounds. But I wanted to use that as a metaphor throughout the book for grief, and thinking about how it's important to enter that space continually and to care for it and tend to it as you would any other part of your life. And so it felt important to have that as the title as well.
I feel like it connects up with how some people react to grief that another person's experiencing, which is to try to get past it or get through it, or to tell someone it'll be okay, or the belief that comfort means putting that in the past. And some people might even be confused at ongoing grief, being like, well, why isn't she over it yet? Why haven't you got through this? And this metaphor helps understand that, of actually trying to just cover it up and put it away and let it dry out. Then it's just there festering, and you're not letting it heal, right?
Right. And so I think that is something that people, again, because of their discomfort, they're like, whoa, we want to stop talking about this. It's been 13 years. Why are you still talking about this?
Yeah.
But that feels way more unhealthy than being able to talk about my dad. I did a reading, and this woman came up to me after, and she said, oh, I'm so sorry to hear about, what you were dealing with. I hope you're doing better. And I wanted to be like, yeah, he's alive again. He came back.
Yeah, it's all good.
Exactly. So I think that it's very much.
But I also know what she means, right? We hope people will be okay, but I feel like sometimes when I know I've done that in the past, and when I've reflected back on it, what I was really doing was trying to manage my own discomfort, I think. It hurts to see people hurt, and you know.
Yeah, and it's hard to sit in that with people. It definitely is, but I do think it's important.
Like a wet wound, who wants to sit there and be with this bloody looking thing? That's not great, But it's real though. But it's real. Yeah.
And I think too, I think the more that people have experienced it, the more comfortable they are. When I was in grad school, another student told me that my writing was a maudlin plea. And I was just like, okay, well, this is just not.
Also a very
Yeah, it
pretentious way to say it.
Yeah,
Who says maudlin?
you can imagine. But
Yeah, that's a very
yeah,
maudlin plea, Maddie.
exactly.
How
Yeah.
droll.
So I was like, okay, this is like my writing just isn't for him. He is not my reader. We'll let him think what he thinks, and I'll
Yes.
continue doing what I would like to do. But then, like a year later, his dad died, and he came to a reading that I was doing, and afterwards he was like, "Oh, that was so beautiful and moving. Like I really felt seen." And so I also think it teaches you people's reactions tell you more about them than they do about yourself or the situation at all. It's just that he felt really uncomfortable and hadn't experienced anything like that. And so he didn't know what to do with that discomfort.
I like to try to pause at my gut reactions to things and kind of interrogate myself. Like, well, is there something behind? Like a critique of your writing
Right.
could be really flippant, but it could be like, maybe there's something more behind that. And it sounds like, I mean, I hate for anyone to learn
Right.
that like lesson, but your writing was there for him when he needed
Yeah.
it. So
And I think too, Susan Sontag talks about looking at these war photographs, and she talks about how there's pleasure in flinching. And I think that is
Yes.
part of it, that there is this pleasure in flinching, but then still looking. I think there's something interesting about that I felt called to interrogate.
I love that Susan Sontag quote. You've got it in the book, and it reminded me of the cover where you've got this really visceral image, and there's definitely a pleasure in looking at it, but there's a flinch to it too. It's such a powerful cover. The book is called The Wet Wound, an Elegy and Essays by Maddie Norris. And Maddie is visiting assistant professor at the Davidson College in North Carolina. And her award-winning work has also been named as notable in Best American Essays. All right, let's switch gears, Maddie, and talk about a chapter called Dear Hilda. And this is it's actually a letter that you wrote to a woman who came to your dad's funeral, a woman that your dad once loved before he met your mother. So tell us a little bit about Hilda.
So Hilda, like you said, is this woman that came to my dad's funeral, but she didn't introduce herself. I've never met her. I still haven't. My dad dated her for 6 years before he met my mom. And so part of writing to her is trying to understand a different part of my dad's life that I don't have access to. A lot of this book is investigating different parts of his life to continue to learn things about him and to grow our relationship in the ways that I can. So finding out new things about him, and Hilda is one key to that. It's a part of his life that I obviously was not around for and don't have any access to. And it also had me thinking about, they did love each other, but that was not enough for them. And so in a similar way, it felt like I loved my dad and that was not enough to keep him alive. So I felt this emotional connection to her that way.
And the fact that she came to his funeral means that it made a pretty big impact on her. I think that he dated her when starting from like age 17 to like 24-ish. So it's also a pretty formative time in a life, but it seems like the relationship was enough to where she wanted to pay, her last respects.
Yeah, it was as he finished high school through college and into the start of medical school. So it was a really formative time. And, they were not in contact in any way before he died.
Mm-hmm.
So
how did you find out about her?
Yeah, I found out about her. She knew my dad's siblings. And so one of them told us, like, oh, that was Hilda. That's the only reason I knew. And I only found out afterwards. So I had no idea that she was there at the time, nor would I probably have registered it in any way. But yeah, that's the only way that I found out. She didn't contact me. I haven't reached out to her. Yeah.
And I imagine Hilda's probably a pseudonym, so there's maybe no... I guess the odds of her having seen the letter in your book aren't large.
Yeah, I mean, that is her real name, but I think it's unlikely
really?
that... Yeah.
That's bold.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't mind talking to her, but I also... Obviously, I haven't sent the letter.
Yeah.
So it was very much a way for me to kind of reach out in thinking about my dad and less about like connecting with this woman who I have no relationship with and probably wouldn't even if we did connect, but more thinking through these different parts of his life. And writing to her was a vehicle for me to think through that. And I also think that writing a letter felt important to me, partially because of the postcards. So I write about postcards in the book and this collection. Obviously, I just read some of it. But I think writing is inherently about connection and relationships. And this book at its core, I feel like is really about connecting through grief. So that form felt really important to me as well.
You also learn, like you're learning about their relationship it was really a strong and important relationship in both of their lives. And you reflect with Hilda your own kind of feelings and beliefs about connection. And you say to Hilda, to be honest with you, I've worked hard to cut myself free from connection's net. I prickle when someone gets too close. Everything's new and wrong. Whenever I begin to wonder what a man is doing while I'm writing in the library or walking up a challah-studded trail, is that?
Oh, cholla, yeah.
Oh, gee. I don't know what a cholla is.
Oh, you should look them up.
It's
It's like a desert plant.
Okay. Or sipping chamomile in bed, I sigh. I make every beginning into an end. Hilda, I'm scared of love because I lost it. You mentioned you have a boyfriend now, so the connection thing has perhaps changed a bit.
Yeah, I think that writing this book was really important for me in that way, in thinking through and processing. So again, a lot of it felt like in the beginning, I would try and talk about my dad and people would shut down. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll just shut down too. And that made getting close to anyone really hard because it felt like I was holding back this really important and essential part of me.
Yeah.
And I was pretty scared to be vulnerable with that because I had been shut down so many times. And I think as I was writing this book, I became more and more comfortable talking about him and telling other people and sharing that part of my life. And that was really, I don't know that would have happened had I not written this book. So writing was a way for me to start thinking about him and writing about him. But then I would share these essays with people, and that was a way for me to open up this talking space. And then I would do it outside of essays. And so, like, I think the book is a discovery for myself as well. As I was writing it, I didn't know where it was going to take me. I just felt compelled to write it. And I do think that it deeply changed me as a person.
I think this is a really important point, Maddie, because with a book like this and other memoirs and things, a lot of authors like yourself, they don't start with the lessons already learned and like that they're going to convey that to readers. Like we go along with you in a process of learning and discovery, and you don't necessarily have the end in mind. And to know that that's what we're getting in a book, I think it's important to pick a book up that way instead of like, this author has all the wisdom and now they're going to convey it to me. Like, we're witnessing you learning.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I love about creative nonfiction is that it really is all about the discovery process. I wouldn't write if I knew what I was going to say. Like, you know, Joan Didion says, I write entirely to find out what I'm thinking. And I think that that's true. Like I would be pretty bored to write something that I already knew. And so I enjoy writing because I learn something. And I hope that the reader is like in a sidecar as we're going along learning this together. But I do think that is specific to creative nonfiction. Like I was even talking to a fiction writer, Sherry Flick, who had written a nonfiction book as well. And she was saying it was really scary because I didn't know what was going to happen. Like I didn't know what I was going to write. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. I hadn't realized that process, that impulse wasn't the same in fiction, that it's very unique to creative nonfiction.
Yeah. I interviewed Marilyn Robinson like years ago, and she described it as like she was always interested to find out what her characters would do and come up with. But it was a real revelation to be like, oh, you're like discovering along with what your characters are doing. That seems the opposite of what I expected. Of like, you've got the story figured out and now you're writing it down. She's like, no, I'm letting them tell the story.
Yeah. And I think, even in fiction, it's like there are all of these possibilities and ways that it could go. And like you can imagine different ones. And in nonfiction, there are still, all of these possibilities, but they all are grounded in truth and reality in some way. Even if you're imagining, you have to say, I imagine. So even though there are all these possibilities, it is like there is a pool that you're pulling from. It's not just infinite. Yeah.
And, your pool can change over time. So here you're talking about how hard it is for you to have close connections. Later in the book, you say, I enjoy weddings. And you say, I can even envision a future wedding day for myself and I can see a beautiful dress, but I don't really see a partner there. And you say you've never told someone I love you. So this is when you're writing it. And it sounds like at least some of those things have probably changed by now.
Yeah, they definitely have. I'm in love.
Yeah.
But yeah, and again, I think that writing the book was really essential in changing me and allowing myself the space to change. And I think that writing through it changed me as a person, not just as a writer or a reader, but fundamentally who I am in a way that, again, I hope that the process of reading it allows people to change and adapt or open in some way. Because I don't think, I wouldn't be in this relationship if I hadn't written the book.
When did you meet?
We met about 5 months ago now.
Okay.
So I'd been in one serious relationship before, which also I think I wouldn't have done if I hadn't written the book. But I do think that writing the book has allowed me to be more open and vulnerable, and it's allowed for real connection, and it's allowed me to really explore who I am as a person so that I can share that with someone else.
Does he know the stakes of dating a writer and
Yeah, he is currently, he's almost done reading the book.
Okay. Does he know he could become a future subject? That's the thing I'd be like, what might you write about this? Oh no.
Yeah, I mean, that is the danger. You should always know anytime you're having a conversation, even just in passing with a creative nonfiction writer, you could end up on the page. So he does know the stakes, but he's wonderful and very kind. So I would only write good things about him.
Yeah, okay. For now, anyway. No, just stay tuned. Well, you talk about, other family members. You also introduce us a bit to your mom. There's a piece I wanted you to read on page 40 that introduces us to her a little bit.
There's a long list of toxic mothers in literature. Gertrude from Hamlet, Charlotte from Lolita, Mrs. Bennet from Pride and Prejudice, Medea from Greek mythology. Watch a Disney movie. The Jungle Book, The Little Mermaid, The Fox and the Hound. Watch Aladdin, Tarzan, Beauty and the Beast. Watch Bambi. The mothers are absent or dead. Without them, their children can go on journeys of growth and adventure. The mothers birth the children, and their job is done. The child's story starts at birth, after separation from the mother. This all means that mothers don't get stories of their own, but I want my mom to have her own story. I want to give her a peace of mind. I think of how different I would be if my mom weren't here, if I had grown up without her. She taught me what it means to care. This week she called me, upset that she had the dog spayed. How silly, she said, but I'm taking motherhood away from her. She comes home from work, sits down on an empty couch, and closes her eyes while the dog flops beside her, then places her paw on her breastbone, pining to be seen. My mom is annoyed by this, the fact that she has no downtime, the fact that she comes home from work and cannot close her eyes without another needy body needling her. But mostly, truthfully, she loves this. She comes home from work to a dog who loves her, not just an empty house. She's a child psychologist, and she sits on the floor with kids every weekday, watching them build with Legos, helping them imagine worlds larger than their homes, impossible worlds where love exists without loss.
That's Maddie Norris reading from The Wet Wound, an elegy and essays. So from what I can tell, Maddie, your mom hasn't remarried. Is that still true?
Yes, that's correct.
Right. That can raise concerns for kids who have lost parents. There are a few times in the book where you kind of reflect on what the life of your mom will look like going into the future now that your dad's gone.
Part of it is that my parents had an amazing love and still do. My mom still loves my dad. She still keeps it with her and she doesn't, she misses him. She misses having someone to do things with too, but she's not going to remarry because she's not going to find that love again. And that's for her. I think everyone has their own experience and their own way of moving forward. But yeah, I think that for a while I was really, really preoccupied with my mom and thinking about her. And I worried constantly. I couldn't stop thinking about it and imagining it. And I think, again, part of it is that I rely on her so much. And I think that finding these connections with other people has been helpful in that, I don't love my mom any less. I don't care for her any less. But those other connections allow me to confront the fact that, some days she will die. And, that's heartbreaking for both of us. But it also means that we can appreciate the time that we have and have so much fun together now and experience life together. And it also means that I don't take for granted the time that she's here. Yeah, I spend a lot of time with my mom. We go to, basketball games. We know we don't have infinite time. And we want to enjoy the time that we have.
And even when you're enjoying it, I also like that you point out you can be lonely together too. And there's a difference between solitary loneliness versus being lonely with someone else. And she's someone that you can not only just enjoy the moment with, but also who you can be lonely with sometimes.
Yeah, and someone that I don't feel like I have to put on a happy face and move through things. And it's okay if we're both missing him. Sometimes we just need to miss him. I mean, always we miss him, but sometimes we feel it more acutely than other times, and we don't have to hide that.
How did she feel about the book?
She was super supportive. I know that, again, people have a variety of experiences with publication and writing about people in their lives. I was really lucky in that almost everyone that I talked to was incredibly supportive and excited about the book. The thing that's been a little bit surprising is after publication, she's like, I didn't realize how much I was in it. She read it before, but now that some of her friends are reading it, she's like, they talked to her about things and she was like, oh, I guess I am in it quite a lot. And there is a lot of me in this. So, she has been really excited to see it come out. And I think that it would be incomplete without having her in it because really my family was a family unit. And so it feels essential that I have that close family represented here because when my dad died, it affected all of us, both separately and as a collective. And so, our relationship obviously has altered because of that.
Yeah.
And I wanted, again, this book is really about grief and the way that we move through grief and those connections that come through it. So I think a lot of our relationship has grown through that, particularly because it happened when I was young. And so we've had all of these years to continue our relationship, but that really still touches all of it.
And the death seems to have impacted your brother, Will, differently than you as well. You have some stories in here about him, and he seems like a pretty stoic kind of guy, really focused on practical stuff. He cares about you, but the way he'll manifest that is by asking you if you're keeping your car washed enough to to keep it in good shape and stuff. So he's processing the loss, quite differently.
Yeah, he's an engineer, so his communication skills are not always excellent. And I also think that, my dad died when he was going into college. So he had moved away from all of these people that had known my dad, from all of these connections that had supported him, that he had grown up with. He was really in a new environment. And I also think that being a male in the South, he was not encouraged to express himself or to talk to people about these things. So I think he kept a lot of it, inside, which made it really hard for him. So I think that he is also starting more to excavate and to move through that. And I think that as both of us do that, that's been helpful for our relationship. But I do think, again, the book is a place, it's like this object that we can both kind of had that as this touchstone to talk about these things or to connect over them when he feels sometimes uncomfortable talking about them.
Yeah, these masculinity norms and just like, it can be really tough, and the kind of social pressures that channel how we process grief differ. Has he read the book yet? Has he checked it out?
Yeah, he's read all of the parts that he's in. I sent them to him before, and he is a slow reader, so he is making his way through it, but he is not, to my knowledge, finished it. And again, I know he is a slower reader, so that's part of it, but it is also, I mean, his life too.
Exactly.
So I think that it is, pretty emotional as well for him. And as you were saying, like, even you, when you got the book, it was this thing where there was like this hesitation.
Yep.
And I have friends who, really excited to read it, but they also haven't done it yet because they've had a parent who died and they're like, I just don't know that I'm ready yet. So it is hard emotionally as well for him.
And there are a lot of times in the book where you reflect on people's inability to sit in the pain, or at least their confusion about knowing what to do with it. There's a quote on page 48 where you say, "Grief doesn't end, but at some point, people outside the loss stop looking. Only those within it remain vigilant to absence." I wondered what more you would have to say to people who are wondering how to be better grievers with people, how to be present with people in their pain, because there's a lot of dumb things we can say to someone when they're grieving.
Yeah. I mean, I think just listening is so important. Like, I don't even know that you need to say anything, but, I love when my friends will ask me about my dad. There are people that knew him that will bring him up and talk to me about, I thought of him when I saw this today, which is really wonderful to have that shared experience with people. But, he died when I was pretty young. And, similar with you is that there's going to be a whole chunk of people in our lives that have never known him and never will. And so it's really just giving space to that and, trying to, I just appreciate when people try to learn more about him. And it's something that I really like to talk to other people about too, is to hear about, their parents. I'm wondering if you would tell me about your dad, what he was like.
My dad?
Yeah.
I think, there's that part where they said, tell more about your dad's faults, because then people can like relate more. And I think some of my dad's faults probably come more readily to mind for me. I loved my dad deeply, but he was pretty serious, man, stern. When he was joking, it was really fun because it was sort of unusual. He had a good sense of humor, but that wasn't kind of his default position. I think he was really stressed out. He had 5 kids, worked full time, and my mom stayed at home. We were kind of a conservative family, so it was important to him that she be at home with the kids and he would work. So I just put a lot on his shoulders, and it was really interesting to kind of spend time with you and your dad's relationship and triangulate a little bit from that, because not everybody who's lost a parent will have this clear cut of a love, but that doesn't mean that the pain is any less. It's just different, because you also grieve the dad that maybe he could have been, or the dad that he could have become, and the dad that he probably would have become. And I wonder what he would think about me today, or what. There's just so much, right? And anytime a milestone hits, you're like, oh, what would dad be up to? Or like if you wanted to ask for advice, or like all those times you see other people enjoying their relationships with their dad. Yeah. So that's my dad. My dad was he was a good man. He was imperfect, but he was a good man. And it was nice to see him refracted through the lens of your dad too. Yeah.
Yeah. What did y'all like to do together?
He was really big into Boy Scouts, and so I was into Boy Scouts because that was really when I could get the attention of my dad and just be with him. And I feel like I could make him proud there. That I got my Eagle Scout when I was like 14 years old, I think. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, because I was just motivated to be in it. And that was a big part of our relationship. When we would go camping together, he would play basketball with us sometimes. We had a basketball hoop in our backyard, so I have a lot of memories about that. But my biggest memories, which is sad, is I really remember him working a lot. I really remember him being gone a lot. So,
Yeah.
it's hard.
It's complicated.
I could envision a reader who reads this and feels more pain because they're like, man, what a loving and incredible relationship you had with him, and to be sort of jealous of that. But also, it opened up doors for me, and sometimes it's hard to remember everything. I was only 15 years old, so how well could I really have gotten to know the man before he died?
Yeah.
Is a sort of self-absorbed teenager, or a teenager who's trying to like figure out what the world's about? So I don't know. I've actually felt closer to him in some ways after becoming a parent, because then I could, especially having a kid that's kind of like me, then I could relate to him a little bit more and be like, oh, I see why he was like mad at me sometimes.
Yes.
Like, he would love witnessing what's happening here, I'm sure. This would be very cathartic for him.
Yes. He's like, yeah, you were just like that.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for asking, by the way. That's sweet.
Yeah. No, like I said, it's nice to hear about other people's. Yeah.
Yeah, because even when we have differences, there's a pretty easy connection that can happen when you can talk about it. Like, my partner's mom died, I guess it's been about 10 years now, and she lived with us as she was dying. She was only 62 when she died. And being able to witness that and be part of that, it could have divided us in a lot of ways, but it opened some doors between us that it brought some intimacy to our relationship that we wouldn't have had we not both lost parents.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it speaks to a recurring theme in the book, this vulnerability that love requires. Like, love often entails some pain. And I want to dig into that a little bit more with you. I picked a few other excerpts to have you read, and the first one's actually a little history report. So these pop up throughout the book. This is how your book works. You'll give us some personal reflections and memories, and you'll kind of put them next to something like the history of postcards or the history of human dissection and stuff. So this one's actually about the history of skin grafts. It was fascinating. I didn't know this history at all. So not only to learn kind of the science of it and the history of it, but to think about it in terms of grief was also really interesting. So let's check this one out. It's called Carve Us New.
In 1817, another skin graft was performed. A thumb smeared with disease, a body in need of division, a hurt healed and swaddled in stories. At 16, Sir Astley Cooper moved to London to study surgery, though his interest was minimal until one day, his teacher, tired of his pupil's laziness, sawed the arm off a corpse, took it home where Astley lodged with him, and dropped it in front of his student.
Can you believe this?
Yeah. The boy looked up. The skin was pale, the blood still, muscles stiff and spilling out. The arm smelled rank as decomposition took hold. The teacher told Astley, "Dissect it." After that, Sir Astley considered every day without dissection a failure. He felt drawn to this surgical work, pulled to expose the interior of the body in order to heal the whole of it. Day after day, he watched the glint of a scalpel push through skin and into blood. The metallic smell never left him. He was brutal, taking on jobs others wouldn't, gruesome surgeries, because he knew that inflicting temporary pain was sometimes the most compassionate thing to do. 4 years into Cooper's tenure as anatomy professor at the Royal College of Surgeons, an unnamed observer recorded in the surgeon's notebook an account of a graft onto an amputated thumb. First week to July 25th, union seems to have taken place. Second week to August 1st, Mr. Cooper proved the vascularity of the newly attached portion by pricking it very slightly with the point of a lancet, which produced fluid blood as readily as from any other part of the joint. Sensibility has not returned. Third week from operation. In the course of this week, sensation has returned in the end of the stump. A field of skin was pulled up and placed in a sea of blood. It attached. When pierced, it bled. When pricked, it hurt. The graft was declared a success when the skin could feel again, when pain came back to it.
Yeah, the connections are so perfect. Let's put that next to another reading. This one's on page 74, where you kind of talk about emotional pain. So seeing that the doctor's journal where he's like writing down the stuff, you could see someone keeping an emotional diary of the same kind of thing of like, saw ice cream, felt terrible, like felt absolutely awful.
Yeah.
Saw ice cream, wanted to eat some, felt melancholy. Saw ice cream, thought of this time I ate it with my dad, felt amazing and sad. You know, like you could kind of like trace it. All right. So I'll have you read this piece on page 74. This is from a chapter called Phantom Longing.
Meleager, a poet from the 1st century BCE, writes, "Pain has begun to touch my heart, for hot love, as he strayed, scratched it with the tips of his nails, and smiling said, 'Again, O unhappy lover, thou shalt have the sweet wound burnt by biting honey.' Love claws open your heart and leaves behind desire, that sweet wound. I consider my wounds. At a bar, when I mentioned financial inheritance and someone said, 'That must be nice, some distant relative, huh?' In the kitchen, with chilaquiles frying, when someone rolled their eyes at the ultra-white tennis shoes their dad wore. In another country, when I asked a sweaty guitarist his name and he answered back my dad's. His absence is everywhere, and it hurts. Of course it hurts. But it tastes sweet too. Walking by a stone church, I remember in the pews how he would elbow me and sing, 'All things dull and ugly, all creatures short and squat.' Checking the shower temperature, I remember how he flung water at me, tricked me into thinking it was from the toilet. Spreading a restaurant's napkin across my lap, I remember our placemats at home. They were wooden rods woven together and dyed bright colors. After a few years of use, they became faded from summer suppers on the porch, so Dad and I went to the store to buy new ones, but we didn't tell Mom. At home, we threw away the old ones and left the new ones soaking in the sink for Mom to see. 'Oh my goodness,' she said. 'How did you get these clean? I scrubbed and scrubbed, but they never came clean.' 'Windex,' I said, and Dad smiled. 'This one's even a different color, but it looks so clean,' she said. We let her praise Windex for a few hours before we told her the truth. Years later, at the restaurant, unfolding my napkin, I smile. Absence is an opening, a hole you can drop through. The 13th century poet Rumi says, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." When I talk about my wounds, the spots scraped empty inside me, I'm not just talking about pain. No, I'm also saying, look how much I can hold.
Yeah, look how much I can hold. Oh, you should have let her believe it was the Windex forever.
Forever, yeah.
Let's do one more. Can we do one more?
Yeah.
This one's on page 163 from a chapter called On the Love of Hills. I felt like these three really went together really, really beautifully.
When I feel the thin soles of Converse sneakers, taste the coolness of mint chip ice cream, smell the sea salt air, I hurt. I'm always hurting. He wore them to his wedding. It was his favorite flavor. We scattered his ashes in the ocean. The shadow thought to everything is this: my dad is dead. It's why the scuffed voice of David Byrne pinches me behind the nose, why the bite of Blue Moon beer kicks at the backs of my knees, why the smell of blueberry muffins crumples me. I keep hurting, not because I'm masochistic, but because not hurting feels worse, because forgetting hurts more than loss. I'm trying to explain that every pain is a resurrection. But the pain in my body isn't a neat metaphor. It's real. I take a step and my sesamoid pokes into soft tissue, the small dagger of self stabbing self. Imagine walking everywhere with a nail pushed through the bottom of your shoe, sharp metal digging into pink muscle and knifing against bone, blood loose like quarters dropped into a purse. How can anyone understand anyone else's pain? My pain is not an image, an allegory, a literary symbol. My pain is neurons screaming. It is shouting in every step. It is constant, everyday pain living in my body. Feel it.
That's Maddie Norris reading from The Wet Wound, an elegy and essays. Maddie, it would have been tempting for me to pick like a really happy piece to kind of conclude with, but I didn't. I chose this one on purpose because I wondered about that ongoing pain and the shadow thought. You talk about the shadow thought. It's kind of like this, it's like a footnote to everything that happens in your life. And
Yeah.
for me, it's kind of comes and goes, and it's stronger at sometimes than it is at other times. And I wondered, again, where you're at today with the shadow thought and when you're thinking about that ongoing pain of having lost someone.
I'm glad that you picked those excerpts because I do think they go really well together and they get at this central idea of pain in a couple of ways. I mean, I think each of them takes it quite literally and it's saying, you know, these facts are real. So when I'm writing about the pain in my foot, like that's not just a metaphor. It is literal. Like I do have pain in my foot, but it's also metaphorical. And so I wanted to have like both of those lenses coupled together. And I feel like in my day-to-day life now, I think the shadow thought will always be there. I think that in Franny and Zoe by J.D. Salinger, he talks about the Jesus prayer, which is a prayer that you say over and over again until your body picks it up, and then your body says it even when you aren't consciously saying it. And I really feel like that is kind of my Jesus prayer, is that like it is constantly running through my body that my dad is dead. And that is always going to be true. But also, I think that that's a way for me to continue my relationship with him, is to keep thinking about him and talking about him and moving through that absence rather than pretending it doesn't exist. So I think that it's kind of both things are true, and that it's always going to be devastating that he died. And also, he still brings me joy in my daily life.
I don't know his name.
His name is Tom.
Tom. Okay.
Yeah, Tom Norris.
Tom Norris. All right, well, Maddie, I always like to close with regrets, challenges, and surprises. This is a time for you to reflect on the process of making the book itself, and if there's anything that you regret now that it's been published. Like maybe, you know, regret doesn't have to be such a negative thing. It can be like, gosh, I kind of wish I included this or didn't include that, you know, whatever, like something you would change about it today. Or what the most challenging part of creating this book was. Or a surprise. And we've talked about surprise quite a bit. I mean, the whole process of this book, I think, was a surprise in that you were processing stuff. So I don't know, maybe we've covered that one. But what would you like to speak to for regrets, challenges, and surprises?
I mean, I think part of the challenge of writing the book is the surprise element, in that you kind of have no idea what you're doing until you've done it, which is a little bit challenging and pretty scary.
Yeah, you didn't like map an outline, right? And be like, okay, I'm going to hit these notes. Yeah.
No, and I didn't even know I was writing a book until I had several essays that were thinking about the same thing, and then I was realizing that they were in conversation with each other. So yeah, it was a process of discovery from the beginning to the end. And yeah, I think that it is challenging not knowing where you're going and just trusting the process. And I suppose that's part of life too. It's just not knowing what you're doing until you've done it. But yeah, so I think that the surprise is the challenge really for me. I think that there were many surprises throughout, you know, the writing process and the publication process. And another one that we didn't necessarily talk about, but as I was writing it, I didn't, when I was physically writing it, feel emotional. Like I never cried when I was writing. It wasn't until I got like the proofs of the book that I cried reading it.
Oh, wow.
And I think it was, partially like that distance of me being in it and thinking of it as a writer and like as an artist crafting things versus understanding that this is a thing that is complete and is going to go out into the world. And I don't have to look at it as something that needs all of this revision, but I can just read it as it is. So I think that's surprising to a lot of people and was a little bit surprising to me that like that was the moment when it became emotional for me.
Yeah. Do you get emotional during the readings ever, or?
Yeah, I definitely do. And I think that that's something that I've had to like prepare for a lot. Like, I think it's important for me to be vulnerable in the readings and real with them. And so that means that sometimes I do tear up and things like that. And so I have to prepare myself for readings and be like, okay, is there someone here who like I know is like a home base that I can have after the reading? And I have to know not to schedule things after readings because I'm going to be pretty emotionally drained. And so that's been a learning process for sure. But it is really vulnerable reading it and emotional. And I think that that is really important too. And for me and for also the experience of the reader or the listener to have, me honestly engaging with the material.
Well, there's a little bit of stoicism from you then. Like your brother might be the main stoic in the family, but you try to hold it together in a reading, be vulnerable, but also be centered for people in the audience. It sounds like you're kind of, like even this interview is kind of a negotiation of emotion. And it's really interesting to think about.
Yeah. And I think it is a negotiation of being open and vulnerable, but also being able to like get through the material. Like, I think that's really what I want to make sure is that I don't just like collapse on stage and not finish the reading.
Exactly. You're there, you want to finish the job.
Yeah. And I really want it to be like an experience for the audience. And so I'm really thinking of myself in that role as like a vessel for the work and wanting to do the best job that I can for the work so that the audience can experience it in the best way possible.
Well, I'm really grateful, Maddie. Like I said, by the time I got the wherewithal to sit down and read it, what a difference it made for me. And there's a lot of differences between our stories, but there's so much overlap in the emotional afterlife of losing someone like that. So I just want to thank you for being vulnerable and also sharing that vulnerability and having the talent and the tools to do that, because not everybody does. I couldn't write this, and I'm so glad that you could.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I know we've talked about your dad, but I didn't know if there's anything that made you think of him recently that you would be comfortable sharing.
When I was a kid, many summers would go to a place called Bear Lake, and it's on the border of Utah and Idaho, and it's this big lake, and it's beautiful. It's this beautiful blue lake, and we would go there camping, and we'd stay there for like a week. And this year, I finally kind of got the gumption to schedule this trip for my family. I'm like, we've got to go back to Bear Lake. And so we did. And camping is a time when I really connect with my dad. Like we had this spring bar tent. If anyone out there knows, they're these like really nice canvas, amazing tents. And I'm obsessed with them. And it's like, it takes me right back to camping with him. And so we went to Bear Lake, and I definitely, connected with him this summer in this place. So that's been on my mind for sure.
Yeah, it's really special how like landscapes can hold those memories too.
Oh, yeah.
And going back to them can like bring that back. Yeah.
100%. Landscapes, music, smell, like different foods. They put you right back with them, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was listening to Talking Heads the other day, and I was like, oh, yeah, my dad like thought of him immediately.
I'm surprised he was listening to Green Day with you. That has like bad language. That is definitely one that my dad would not. If my dad had a conversation with me about Green Day, it would have been like, you can't listen to this.
Yeah, he was a big fan of punk music, so there's only so much we could choose from.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, Maddie, thanks a lot. Again, the book is The Wet Wound, an elegy and essays by Maddie Norris, and she's a visiting assistant professor at the Davidson College in North Carolina. Maddie, thanks a lot. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me and for being open to talking about things that a lot of people don't want to talk about. It feels really nice and special.
Thanks for listening to Relationscapes. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. I hope you'll check out some of the other episodes. There's a lot to choose from. We're actually approaching the 50th episode. I can't believe it. You can help me celebrate that by reviewing the show. Rate it in Spotify. It's so easy. You just hit the stars in there, or rate and review it in Apple Podcasts. That's what TR Hick1 did. I think that's how you say their name. They said that they love the diversity of perspectives on the podcast, and it's great for anybody looking for good books to read. Thanks, TR Hick1, for rating and reviewing the show on Apple Podcasts. Mates of State provided our theme song. Relationscapes is part of the Dialogue Podcast Network. I'm journalist Blair Hodges in Salt Lake City, and I'll see you again soon.